switch hopefully to full screen. Can everyone see Justin's face now? Say hi again.
There we
Hello, everybody.
There he is. All right, well, good to have you with us. Tim, please, I want to give you an opportunity to greet everyone as well. So say hello, please.
It's so good to be with you yet another day. So always great to be here thinking of topics. We appreciate the challenges and all the questions. So as always, we want you to be part of the conversation. So raise your hand if you have any input, thoughts, or questions as we go along. Usually people agree with Justin 100%. There's very little clash when he brings up topics. So I'm sure everyone's just going to go along with it. But just in case you want to give a different opinion than Justin, you're more than welcome to kind of raise your hand. We'll bring you in today to include you in the conversation as well.
I was going to say, Tim, I'm not sure if you're being genuine or sarcastic. What we know about our friend Justin is he's a bit of a lightning rod. Justin, you've been at more than one cohort dinner and, shall we say, been rather outspoken. Is that the word?
You know, I have my opinions. I'm passionate about the industry.
Yeah.
But all in good fun, of course.
Yeah, of course. Well, look, let's give everyone a tip off as to why we asked you to come join us today, because there was this article that you stumbled across that had an announcement coming out of, I think, a law firm that was sharing something about a temporary change to SAG-AFTRA. And you and I and Tim started having this email banter back and forth about this thing. And we thought, well, it's actually really interesting because when we're in this short-term crisis like we're in right now, so many firms are wondering, well, what can I do right now? And I thought this is actually a great example of something that's a short-term tactic that could be helpful. And it would be really cool maybe to use it as a starting point to ask, well, what are some other tactics that you're employing, that other owners are employing? But just for background, can you tell us your understanding of what this change is in the SAG-AFTRA rules, this temporary thing, what it's about?
Yeah, and I won't pretend to know it all. I mean, it's a lot of legal stuff. But basically what it appears has happened is SAG and the Joint Policy Committee, the JPC, have always had this sort of long-standing argument about about stock footage and SAG rules. And it looks like they've created a waiver to sort of waive that argument right now, where if you're a SAG signatory or an agency, you're able to use stock footage right now with that waiver and not have to sort of go through all the craziness, or actually be able to use it, where some agencies will just completely shy away from it and not take the chance. So my thinking on it was, this opens up a lot of opportunity, especially for clients of ours who are really diehard SAG, will never take any chances with it. Now we can pitch some ideas of using like stock footage and doing rips and things like that a lot easier. And we reached out to some clients and they're very receptive about this and actually excited, because they're thinking like, wow, great. Something that's been holding us back so much, we're now able to get it in, at least for the short term. With Tim.
I'm curious, Tim, to hear from you. What do you read into this? Like, is this potentially a tactic that owners should look at and say, oh, okay, this does sort of give me some options right now that I didn't have before this change came?
Yeah, it's an interesting play because the clash is there, and the clash really has been like the intention of the stock footage in the past. If somebody shot a commercial with a commercial actor and then had leftover footage and then sold that later on as stock footage, the argument SAG has always, or the JPC and SAG have had, is like, well, is that stock footage or is that commercial footage? And should those actors be paid as if they're a commercial actor, a principal commercial actor? Opposed to, imagine a stock footage house that simply just went out and shot stock, and it was never meant for commercial purposes, but later on was brought into a commercial. There's a clash there of, are those commercial actors? And SAG would say, yes, they still are, regardless of intent. So the clash has been there. And right now it looks like SAG is saying, hey, we're going to look the other way temporarily and see if we can allow for some production to still take place. And in exchange, they're going to allow they want you to, if you're a SAG signator, to still have a voiceover for the commercial that's SAG. So they're not going to give away all the rights, especially voiceover. And they want you to contribute to the benefits fund. But the actor exchange itself, their actor payments itself are what's being waived. But interesting to me, Joel, is that they're reserving their right in the future to pursue this. So really it's a look the other way tactic. And so therefore it kind of is, and as I read it, like it's a very short-term opportunity. They're recognizing in this crisis, in their need, they still need to get funds flowing. They want their actors to go to work. So they're going to release something temporarily, but in the long run, it's going to be very different. And that short-term versus long-term exchange is what's happening here. So I'm curious about like if commercial production companies I have that and I can understand and can pivot with these kind of new terms.
Yeah, I'm curious to ask Justin. I mean, if I'm understanding this, maybe we can net this out. Does this basically mean that using stock footage that would otherwise trigger a principal actor fee just suddenly got a lot less expensive?
Yeah. I mean, it really, our benefit that we see from it is we have clients who can only use, footage with SAG. Like all those rights have to be in place. So now when we're reaching out to them saying like, hey, we can do this project with you using stock footage now. It's capped at $50,000. So these are smaller projects, but we're at least able to say like, we can do this project, this idea that you had with stock footage. And then we can make it work from there. And like, let's show you how to do that. And now they're open to it. Now they see that there's a waiver, and it's definitely a Band-Aid or whatever you want to call it and temporary, but it's a way to, one, reach out to your clients with something new to say other than, hey, we're here and doing remote work. Like, hey, did you hear about this? We're up to date on this. We're looking into it. And you're able to sort of offer just a solution for what's going on right now for agencies or brands who, are living in that SAG world and really can't do anything right now.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because here's what I'm wondering. Is there, could this even be a reason to reach out? So,
totally.
you know what I mean? Like, I'm just thinking, like in your world and others that work in that realm of having to deal with the SAG fees and so forth, to be proactive and think, okay, how do I reach out and even pitch ideas or creative or approaches to taking last year's campaign and doing this year's campaign, but take advantage of this temporary benefit?
Yeah. I mean, at this point, reaching out sort of anything is great. So it's nice to sort of reach out to a client and know that you're kind of on top of this. You have this sort of thought leadership in this area, and then you're thinking for them. You're thinking ahead for them. Knowing that this is not a permanent thing, obviously, but for the next few months, like, let's keep making stuff.
Yeah, especially if you're an editorial house, it seems like this brings up a whole new opportunities that were once kind of just shut out. If it wasn't animation centric, then there was very little editorial house can do. So now be able to go to stock footage libraries and bring other items forward to help tell that story editorially is very helpful. It does also feel like on the creative side, we're going to practice something different. When was the last time, Justin, you asked yourself, hey, what's available in stock footage? Let's go there. We often think, oh, I can shoot my own concept. I can get exactly what I want to. Now that creative energy is kind of turned, isn't it? And you're going to have to deal with what's already shot, but there's still opportunity to work with those as creative elements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no, this is a time where it's going to separate the good creatives from the great ones, for sure. So, if you have an idea that you can pull off with stock, that's great.
Yeah.
So Justin, let me ask you this question, because I'm curious, are there any other just basic short-term tactics that are your go-to things that you always ask yourself or that you discuss internally? Because I know, like, before the call got started, we were saying, like, one question most every owner always asks is, well, during this time, should we lower our rates to get this job? Should we do these projects at cost? And I'm just kind of curious to get your thoughts on, are any of those short-term tactics that you guys are considering or avoiding? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think like everyone else, we're considering everything at this point, right? Short-term tactics, like, We haven't laid anyone off. We have no plans to, but we're putting them to work in other ways. So we have one of our producers, Tom, who's literally went to the office a few weeks ago, grabbed every shoot drive we've had. He's been going through all the footage and selling it to every stock place that we just lined up deals with. Like, there you go. There's something to do. It works when you have thousands of clips and you don't realize, if you're a live action production company, just start selling all that stock. And hey, and if you're doing rips, start buying it back for your rips. There you go. There's the side hustle on top of that. But yeah, I mean, do you do a project for a lower rate? I would normally say no, always. We always say up the value, don't lower the price. But I think, to be honest, I think if you're looking at a budget and you can walk away with money, or you can walk away with keeping employees there and busy, then I think you really have to consider it. Not with a new client though, with an existing relationship, knowing that you're all in this together right now. And I'm sure that agency is sort of doing it for a little bit cheaper for their brand as well, to be honest.
Well, so Tim, I'm curious, that's kind of interesting. That plays a little bit into a conversation you and I are always having called, yeah, there's short-term things we can do, but some of them are reactionary. Some of them are, shall we say, not part of a strategy. It's more like, I just get lucky, right? Like SAG-AFTRA changes the rules, I got lucky. But to Justin's point, he's making this interesting argument that if you're only offering that to clients you already have a relationship with, well, clearly you've been making investments in that relationship that might go back years. And now is your time to find that win-win solution. But that's actually part of a longer term strategy.
Yeah, to me, if you're going to think anything in the short term, it has to have a long-term play. When you're playing a game of chess, you're not just simply moving pieces around the table because there's an open square. You're thinking 3 or 4 or 5 plays ahead of time. And in order to do that and do that well, it really is the difference between being a practice and intentional versus really just improvising and being lucky, right? If you were on a ship, you want to know that that ship captain has thought through how to get from point A to point B and have a very good, successful journey. But you also want to know that they've practiced through the routines, that if something were to happen, they stay calm, they're intentional, and they're able to move people off, opposed to, can you imagine someone in charge of a ship just saying, well, I don't know, like, let's try this temporarily and let's move that way temporarily. And let's try this and experiment. You would never want that in a time of crisis. So that improvised, hoping we're getting there or just get lucky, it honestly feels like how the government's being run right now. Just improvised, insane, hopefully people get lucky. And that's what's driving us all crazy. As leaders, we need to be ahead of the curve and know what it means and what these decisions mean for us. Even just, and I'll go back to the original question, is like, should someone reduce their rates? You have to know what that rate reduction costs you in the long term. Even your thought of like at cost, I would want you to qualify how you understand what those costs are. And if you're using something like the factors method that we practice, you understand what items are included in every project, what the total costs are, and which items I can remove temporarily and not sabotage the long-term health of the company. But a viable business needs to maintain a long-term perspective as well.
Well, that prompts me to ask you a question, Justin, because Tim and I are big believers in part of a long-term strategy is having a dynamic business model where no matter what sales are at, you can respond and run a business and maintain margins if business is up or if business is down, what have you. How is that something that you're seeing the benefits from the way you've been running your business, being able to respond during a time like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's hindsight, but I think we've always run extremely lean. So when this all happened, we just went down like really nothing's ever happening and just all have started working from home. I think a lot of shops sort of who have a lot of employees and like a lot of bills to pay for the month really don't have that luxury. So that's kind of all the way we've always done it. So, but we've taken a good look at our business, I think, in the past, few weeks and had real serious conversations about like our business model and how much money we actually need to bring in and things like that, and where we can reduce costs and what we've been doing wrong. And I think it's been like a really I don't want to say it's been a great experience because it obviously is not for anyone, but it's been a good way to sort of take a look internally at your company and just sort of say, like, is this really working? Because if it's not working when things are bad, then, and is only working when things are good, it's just not working at all.
Yeah.
So, we looked at our company and we had Samantha, who's our managing director, running all the books, just really trimming the fat of kind of all the things that we've, don't really need to be doing right now. And we were in good shape. And I think that's just because, we maintained that sort of lean mentality throughout all of it.
It goes back to what I was saying last week, where for a while, or for this stage, it feels like what we're trying to do is reduce our exposure to the virus, right? Because that's the idea, is like the virus will do harm. So we're going to reduce our exposure. But in reality, this virus has really created more and more exposure to the things and practices we've been doing that are a little bit lazy, they're a little bit off the cuff, not so intentional, a little bit too much fat on there. And that this critical thinking that's now available, you're right, you wouldn't say it's a good experience, but you would say like, wow, what an eye-opening experience and what a wake-up call this has been to what really is important. How do we get through certain things? And really the strength of you as a leader and some of the practices you put in place. And other areas you need to kind of make decisions sooner and be more proactive.
Yeah, yes, that's exactly right. And we were talking the other day, and the stock market is not the only thing that's going to be correcting itself like right now. I really, there's a lot of shops out there who've just been running fat and, not caring, who aren't going to survive this. And I think this is going to be a correction for the environment, for production companies, for businesses across the whole, about, being a little bit smarter, running your business and knowing that something like this can happen and you're going to have to get through it.
So let's throw this short-term tactic out there, or a question about the short-term tactics. Dennis O'Clair made a statement: if you lower the price now, they'll expect that new price when things go back to normal. So that's a comment he's making. But can you imagine that being true, or how to kind of be able to position yourself one way now and be able to reposition yourself later?
I think there's two ways of looking at that. I agree with him. Under normal circumstances, I would be in his corner. I think, you can look at it from that way, which might be true. There's no sort of real relationships in advertising anymore as far as that's concerned. But, or they're going to look at it like you've really helped them out and been able to get work done and work together on it, and you'll come through together stronger. To be honest, I don't know. That's more up to the relationship that you have with them. I would be completely upfront and say, we are discounting this because of this time, but this is not our normal rate. Put your normal rate on the invoice, throw your 25% discount on there to get there. So your rates aren't lower, you're just discounting it and call it your, COVID-19.
Something else I'm thinking about, Tim, is maybe this is a good moment to encourage everyone that if you do decide to lower the rates or do it less expensively in order to get the job and keep your team busy and pay your bills, don't forget to take advantage of the subjectivity in the creative product, right? This is something that you and I always want to remind people. It's like, you don't have to always over deliver, over promise. There's enormous latitude. I mean, this is what creatives are great at, right? That if you lower your price, you have to become maybe really shrewd about, okay, how do we still get this done and still maintain some sort of a margin?
Actually, Nicholas made a comment like that. He said, what we've been doing in reducing costs in these past weeks is clearly communicating the expectation of the end product. And the term I use is managing your client's expectations is exactly what you're working from. So the fact that you would get less money to produce a product that you would have in the past asked for more money, there are plenty of other areas to kind of work with then. Some of that is reducing cost and reducing rates. Others is changing the deliverables or how you produce those deliverables. Even the timeline to produce those deliverables can change so much of the cost related to a project. And that's what you want to think through as a creative entrepreneur. There's so many creative options for you. Start using your mind, your creative mind, to figure out what those solutions are. And you can be challenged by your client to do it. And of course, you're successful, or you can challenge yourself to do it and be successful for yourself. But either way, I want you to start putting that into practice.
Yeah, Justin, how many times have you maybe, like as you're just about to agree on a deal and the project's about to be awarded, and you're nervous about, okay, wow, for this budget, I don't know that this is realistic. And then you come up with that idea of, let's execute the project this way, or this technique, or use this team of artists instead of that team of artists. And the client says, that's incredible, I love that idea. And then behind the scenes that you've made the project faster or easier or less expensive, less complicated, what have you. And it's like this amazing little win-win moment when you realize, I just dreamed that up and here we are. It's a win for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, all the time. And I think, to that point, going even further is sort of how your EP is staggering these jobs or lining them up so that multiple artists are working on things in multiple times. I think that's the real way to do it, is sort of, I don't want to say double book everyone in your office, but scheduling is huge right now. If you have 3 jobs in, you can sort of lay them over in all the right places with all the right sort of times to show work and get feedback and all of that, and just make it harmonious across the whole way. You'll make money on those jobs, even if they're a little bit less of a budget than you wanted. I think scheduling is like the most crucial thing right now that you could be doing, and just like chess, just moving your people around in all the right positions to, what they're good at here, what they can pick up feedback here. And we've been doing that a lot lately, and putting people in different places, overlapping them, just to make everything work perfectly. And we've been, pretty successful, I think, at that.
Well, now you're talking Tim's language, all those producer tricks, right?
Yeah. And especially like with clients right now, that you can actually negotiate some delivery dates and delivery items to change it to meet a better schedule for you. Think about that instead of only just worrying about the cost side of it, but moving some elements around and hitting different dates. There's clearly some flexibility in that as well.
Yeah, like what Nicholas shared here is kind of a cool comment, saying we would limit the amount of animation and usually just focus on quality illustrations, something like that. That's just one idea, where if you can develop a creative that's easier to execute, but the value is still super high, Justin, to use your word, then you're just creating a solution.
Yeah, don't sacrifice the creative quality. I think, and maybe you guys will agree, that the client's always going to remember the quality of the project more than the discount you gave them for it. So,
for sure.
Yeah, Joel, and this might be at the top of mind because we're going to do it this week in your confab group, but thinking through the factors method at this time and what that means in making these decisions. To get down to the basics of factors really is thinking of costs, real costs for your company that are directly related to the project. So you have direct costs, but there are actual costs that are indirectly related to every project. And so when people are talking about reducing costs or trying to find wiggle room, you still have to be careful and protect those indirect costs. If not, you are going into invisible debt and you don't realize it, but you're so used to having those costs covered with future funds. What we don't know is how far out those future funds will come, how much they'll be, and what those margins will be. So to protect yourself so that you don't have short-term, obligate, you're not creating taking some short-term compromise and creating a long-term obligation that you just need another bailout for. I think that the PPP opportunity might be a little infusion of cash that will almost, again, might create a bad practice for some people, and they slow down in making certain decisions to be successful in the long run. And I want people to understand, what is that impact? So if you take your expenses and recognize those that are directly related to projects, we can manage with rates that we're paying our talent and schedule and the timing of things and the amount of deliverables, many of the things that we can compromise.
Stock footage.
Those indirect costs really are real costs. They're not fake. And that's often the owner's salary, rent, utilities, insurances, and you can't just throw those on your Amex card next month because you didn't cover the cost now. Make sure you're making the right decisions globally and right sizing your entire company when making these decisions.
Yeah, I know what's going to happen is at some point we'll have to do a crash course in that factors methods. So, because I think a lot of us were taught to look at our QuickBooks, right? And we just see income and expense, and there's not that division between direct and indirect. So it's really hard to just look at the piece of paper that your bookkeeper hands you every month and and figure out what you're talking about.
Yeah, we're so used to looking at the byproduct of all our decisions and hoping that we made it, like as a result, a reactionary result, instead of being able to look forward into those decisions and be able to designate where that money is going to go ahead of time. So the P&L isn't a report card hoping that you got the right score. The P&L is a scorecard proving that you got where you wanted to go, and give you areas for adjustment to adjust further on. So that mentality now, even when I think about short-term tactics, I don't mind them, but they really kind of freak me out giving owners an advice that short-term tactics are okay, because what they do is create long-term debt. Unless they have a strategy of how the long-term will cover the short-term, I say don't do it, because you're just going to create a hole that you can't fill later on.
Yeah. Well, obviously this thing like this SAG-AFTRA thing that Justin shared with us, it's luck, right? It's just this thing that just pops up, and great, let's take advantage of it. But if I was an owner saying, oh, for the next downturn, my strategy is I'm going to wait for another SAG-AFTRA thing to pop up, right? That's not a plan. That's just hoping. And
yeah, another lucky storm, whatever.
Well, I know we're about down to 3 minutes left here. I just want to encourage anyone who has a question or a comment, please drop it in the chat here. Ask Justin a question. And I know, Tim, I noticed that Toby had a question about the PPP, if we want to dive into that favorite topic.
I do want to probably give people updates, because it seems to be an ongoing conversation with almost every call that I have. But just so people know, I had a client today that got an infusion of about $350,000 from the PPP. So that money's in their account today, and they filed probably last Friday or something like that, the first day you can file. So that was Chase Bank. Seems like Chase is releasing funds. I also know one of the Rev Thinkers kind of got an infusion from Chase today as well. I personally got an EIDL advancement today. So I got a couple of notices from the SBA, and then I got the advancement. It is exactly what they said. It is $1,000 per employee. It is not the $10,000 they originally had offered, but it is a little bit of something. So that should be coming as well. So keep your eyes out. I personally have the FICO score indicator on my cell phone. And yesterday I saw the SBA had pulled a credit report from me. So I kind of felt like something was coming through. But that, just so people know that there is money working itself out. It is starting showing up in checking accounts. I'm sure it depends on how close your information was together, how it all kind of seared up with that bank and what their qualifying parts were, and then just how fast they can get the information out there. But keep your eyes peeled if you did that.
I know we've got just 1 minute. Do we have a minute to have Toby jump in and ask his question?
Yeah, sure.
All right, Toby, if you can raise your hand, let's see if we can get you in here. Let's see, there's his hand, allow to talk. All right, Mr. Toby, are you with us? Wait for it.
Can you hear me now? Is it
there
working now?
Hey, Toby.
Perfect. Hey, thanks for taking my question. I've watched so many of your recordings. I'm pretty new to it, I think, but I have one question in regards to the PPP that is very confusing to me. And Tim, the other day, about a week ago, I know this is like a long time ago these days, you were mentioning that the PPP is your money. You're actually getting it ahead of time. It's basically getting your tax money up front. What do you mean by that?
So that's just such a, you're pulling out a quote somewhere. I'm trying to figure out what the context was, but you think of it like this, the fusion of capital that the government's giving you is in the form of a loan. So they really are kind of lending you money. If you use that money for employees or for payroll during the 8-week period that from the time they give it to you to time of completion, if you use 80% of that in that time period, they'll forgive it. In that case, it's free money. So don't think of it as you have to pay that back. If you don't do that, it converts to a loan. And that loan has a low percentage rate, but does have to be paid back with regular loan terms. What if you ask me what the strategy of the PPP is that they're giving it to you as a business owner in order to create payroll, because they collect taxes from the people on payroll. So that when you give one of your employees $100, that employee is going to give the government back 30% of that. So they're going to give $30 of every
Okay.
$100 back to them. So it's how they're going to refinance some of the money they're giving out there. So that
Got it.
might have been what I was alluding to.
Yeah, because I was just curious. I just wanted to avoid it being something like it's your money, you're actually getting it ahead of time, as in if we don't claim it now, we would get it next year on our tax return kind of thing.
That is,
So,
I might have been referring to what the government is doing by putting the $1,200 in everyone's mailbox for every tax filed mailbox. That is your
Okay,
money ahead
okay.
of time. That is
Okay.
your future tax return given to you today. So that's not the
Got it.
PPP loan. That's the other advance the
Got it.
government is
Yeah.
giving to employees.
Yeah, because I'm a single member LLC, and my community bank in Chicago told me that they are not supporting the PPP, so I have to look out for another bank now. And I was just curious if it's even worth it to put up with all that remote setting up business bank accounts kind of thing if I would end up getting the money anyway, just in a year from now. But if that's actually not the case, then I'll go ahead and try to find a bank.
I'd say it's worth doing it. I've had some clients use Cabbage. It's spelled Cabbage with a K. It's like a business lender. They were accepting applications, and a lot of like local banks in my area were accepting applications. They put you later in the list, but it's definitely worth doing.
Sure.
You can't go wrong by getting the free money if you use it properly.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying.
Good questions. Thanks, Toby.
Yeah, thanks, Toby. Very cool. Well, I guess we should wrap it up here. We're 2 minutes past our half-hour slot. But first of all, before we wrap it up, I want to give a big thank you to Mr. Justin Barnes from Versus. Thanks for joining us from your pad in where? Connecticut somewhere?
Yeah, I'm up in Connecticut right now in Westport.
And I love your stylish digs up there. I can't wait to come visit someday and have a Montenegro with you there.
I hope that soon.
Justin, it was great having you. Thanks for all of your insights and your encouragement. You as like a community leader, it's awesome to have you with everything that we're doing. So
I'm trying to keep up with you guys. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, Justin. As for everyone else, we'll see you here tomorrow. Obviously, we'll see a lot of you in the 7 Ingredients Slack channel, where we will continue questions about PPP and EIDL and other short-term tactics. If you don't have the invite to that, just watch. Ethan will post it here in the chat on Zoom. Until then, Tim, thanks again. Justin, thanks again. We'll see everyone tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Thank you.